Welcome back to the Free Play Arcade Podcast. I'm possibly in the camera, Chris Delp. I'm the community liaison for Free Play Arcade. I am joined as always by the CEO, Corey.
Not always, but most of the time I'm here.
All the important ones. If he's not in the picture, just skip past that video.
Wow.
We have plenty of extra videos with extra Corey content. But this is an exciting day for me personally because one of my all-time video game heroes is right in the middle here. It's Ben Gold. If you don't know who Ben Gold is, Google Ben Gold Arcade.
Right?
You don't want the rocker. But Ben Gold Arcade, the original United States national video game team, correct?
Yeah.
That's incredible. You won the competition that they had on 5 different games, I want to say.
Yes.
That's primarily what I know you from, except also you're from Dallas. Like, that's the most important thing in my head. Qbert meant a lot to me back in the day. You're the Qbert world record holder. You were at one point. Millipede, Centipede, very good at Defender, and a world record holder at Stargate, which is what got you in the Time Life picture. So if you've seen like the famous picture of the Time Life, it's Time Life magazine, right? Or is
Life magazine?
Well, it was in Life. It was a Time Life shoot for Life magazine. I believe is and you know what? I've been looking at that my entire life. Like way before I opened a bunch of arcades, way before I even did that. I used to look at that and be like, those are the gamers. Like, those are the original gamers. And it was so cool. And you know what the coolest thing was? To see one from Dallas.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Because everybody points to it and says, that right there is Billy Mitchell. And I am completely lost because I don't see anybody there except I see Dallas, Texas right under the Stargate world record holder. And that's Ben Gold.
It was super cool. So let's take a step back really quick. We've got Ben Gold here. It's amazing. It's sick. It's insane. So let's talk about like the arcades you played at first, like 70s, early 80s. Where were you playing in Dallas?
So I'll tell you my story.
Cool. I'm in. I'm ready.
The best ways to begin was, I never really was, up until I think 79, I wasn't really an avid gamer. I mean, there was Breakout, there was Pong, there was, the arcade was a place to kind of lose time.
We're talking pre-Space Invaders games.
Invaders, yeah.
Right, okay.
Then what happened was my dad, so I used to collect baseball cards. Nice. So I have a really good collection. I had one from the 1950s and earlier, but I collected in the 70s. And that was it was a really big thing. My dad was super into comic books. He had the first Batman, Superman, Action Comics, all that stuff. He had a wonderful collection.
Can't imagine,
That's
but
awesome.
Yes.
And we used to go to these comic book shows. So we would go together, and he'd do the comics. I'd do the. I would go look for the baseball cards, and we were in Houston. And one day, we went to this show, and I think it was like on a Friday, Saturday, and it was Sunday. We're gonna head back, and he's like, "Look, I got some errands to run in the Houston Galleria," and he handed me a $5 bill and said, "Here in the arcade, and just hang out." And so I'm walking around. And I have, I got my fistful of quarters, as I would say, and King Kong. And I'm playing, and all of a sudden I just noticed this one game that's got this massive line. And what I did was I went, and it was, if you can imagine, just, like the kid that has to, they put all the quarters in front to wait.
Right.
And I was like this little kid that was jumping to kind of get to just see a little bit of it because there was all these other people around. I must have waited a half an hour to finally be able to put my quarter in. And when I put my quarter in, it was like, that was like this moment, a transformation. I'm saving planet Earth. And
dun,
dun, dun, dun, dun, dun, dun, dun, dun, dun, dun, dun. And I was like, my blood pressure, my adrenaline. And I was like, I have to find that. So I just remember coming back to Dallas. There was a place on Coit and Beltline called Pipe Organ Pizza.
That's literally where I live right now. But yeah, awesome.
Were you there 30 years ago? Do you know?
No, I was a 90s arcade kid. I was not an 80s arcade
because it
kid.
only lasted to the mid 80s.
Yeah.
And so Pipe Organ Pizza was this place where they had this actual, like every day they would have the same show where they would play Annie. So if the sun will show up tomorrow and they actually had this big pipe organ and pizza.
Man, that sounds awesome.
Oh my gosh, it was great. And they had this little place for arcades. So I used to have either my grandfather, my grandma, my parents, or as I got later, I got a bike. I would figure out how to get there. And what started off with Space Invaders then just became this period where, I try to explain to people today that, you'll never be able to go back to the time period when the games came out, because you put a quarter in, you didn't know if it was going to be shit or if it was going to be the most amazing experience.
You didn't have to put a quarter into Blueprint, by the way. It's on free play.
Well, the cool thing about that, though, is like your odds were still pretty good back then. Like, as more and more arcades came out, especially in like the mid 80s, like 86, things got a lot more risky. I mean, because we talk about like 1981, 1982, most of the games were pretty good.
Oh my gosh, yeah. But here's the thing is that 81, 82 was like the quote unquote golden age. I think that's what Walter Day kind of calls it that. And I was kind of, for me, it was just, I'm a competitive person by nature. And so what was interesting is that I was starting to play, and, I would start with a game like Defender. And at the beginning, I would watch these other people zoom, and they get 400,000 points. And I'm like, wow. And I would study them, and I'd play. And then eventually I would be able to surpass them. Then I go on to the next game, Centipede or Pac-Man. And it was, I always kind of joke, especially with my friend Billy Mitchell. We used to talk about this because I always tell him that he likes all the, what is the word?
He likes the pattern-based games.
Well,
maze games.
Not maze. I call them, it's either shoot 'em up or, so I'm the shoot 'em up games. That's the ones I loved, minus the Q*bert. That was kind of my one exception. But I was looking for this competitive environment. I always imagined, it's funny because today we kind of have that, but I always thought there'd be this day where you'd have a stadium and people would be playing video games and there would be real money involved, and the best players would have that as, would be competitive gamers. And it's ironic because, that does exist today.
Yeah. I just took off my Overwatch League jacket. To reveal my Team Free Play shirt.
Well, I've told the story a ton. Back in like 2001, I made $60,000-ish playing Counter-Strike. And I thought that was the future. But it was constantly like games would rise and fall. And this goes way back to the 80s. That's what's really cool about it, is it's constantly like really cool games will come up and fade away. And it's not like football or soccer or anything where it's the same game over and over. It changes all the time.
It does, and also I'd say the economics change, and
well, hold on, really quick. Back in 1979, when your dad gave you $5, I just looked it up. That was $17.71 in today's money. So it would be like your dad basically handing you a $20 bill today. So if you're watching on this and you're like, Free Play Arcade charges $11 to come in, think about that. His dad gave him twice as much money.
Well, think of it a different way. That how much do people spend on? My kids are thinking of getting a VR headset. I'm like, oh my god,
hundreds of dollars, and plus.
Yeah, I mean,
not to count the computer.
Yeah, then you say the computer, the games, and I'm just like, guys, it's insane. Right. So I always say that the typically the video game arcades is a good value, for what you spend.
I think so.
But so there's a lot of different directions, but I'll start with kind of the personal level that in the 81, 82, I was just obsessed with games. So anytime a new game came out, I would try to be the best of it. I was obsessed with them in the sense that we didn't really know what was going to come out next. So as an example, I did get a chance to play in the Centipede World Championships. This was in, I think, 1980 or 81.
This was in Chicago, right?
In Chicago.
Yeah.
So I actually went there. I met the guy who won, Eric Jenner. He's out of California. We actually met later when Twin Galaxies came into the picture.
Started doing their thing, right?
But I saw him from a distance, and I didn't do very well in Chicago, but I won a local competition, and then I came in second for the finals and just went ahead and went. And then there were a couple others. There was like a 7-Eleven championship.
Famous, yeah.
And I was able to make it to the semifinals.
There's also Centipede as well?
It was the Tempest and Stargate, and I can't remember. I don't think Centipede was one of them.
Okay.
No, yeah, they had a bunch of games.
Defender
involved.
And Tempest, and there were a couple other ones. And I I was able to get, let's say, quarterfinals, something like that. I don't remember if I was like 1 or 2 away from the state championship, and then I got killed.
Well, this was one of the hardest states to play in for the 7-Eleven championships because there are more 7-Elevens than any other like state because they're based here in Dallas. So they were like, I read somewhere that they had 15,000 arcades in Texas back in like 1981, 1982.
Yeah, later for the Blockbuster World Championships, it was a similar story.
Yeah,
where
why does this keep happening in Dallas? Well, all the good players are here.
Because, that and also like the big businesses are here as well. So Blockbuster was stationed
tax
here.
rates and stuff.
Yeah.
So it was really interesting. And then I guess where my life changed personally, and then we'll talk about a lot of there's a lot of other topics, is that it is in 83. I should say 1982, actually. Let me go back to the summer. I was in this high score competition on Stargate, and there was another guy who played. There was a couple of local arcades, and, one day he went out and got 3 million points and beat my high score. And I was like, okay. You know what? I said, well, let me go beat your score. So I got 5 million. And that takes about 5 hours, about an hour per million. And it's a marathon game. That means basically play until you fall dead. Okay, that's you get a free guy every 10,000. If you average 15,000, you have all these free guys. And anyway, so he went out and then got 12 million. Mm-hmm. And then and there was a point where I just looked, and he did like a 14 hours. He like went right at the beginning and then stayed to the end of the evening. And so that's when I called up Williams, the manufacturer, and said, hey, what's the world record on Stargate? Because I'm going to waste time. I might as well do it for a good cause.
Right.
And that's when I was told, well, there's this thing called Twin Galaxies, and there's a guy named Walter Day. Mm-hmm. And so I was kind of looking, everybody thought I was obsessed. I never could find the person that wanted to play video games as much as I did from a competitive point of view.
Right.
And finally, when I called up Walter, I felt like I had found what I was looking for. And I'm calling him up and I'm like, say, Walter, I'm going to beat the world record on Stargate. What is the world record? And he's like, it's 36 million. So that's a day and a half. I can do it. Uh-huh. So I told him, I said, I'm going to go beat that world record. And then we were talking. I said, so tell me, what's the world record on Tempest? What is it on Centipede? And he's like, really? I was like, no way. How? And he would start telling me the strategy and all these things that people did. And I'm like, wow. So he told me about Billy, about some other players. And anyway, I remember I started, the funny thing was I started when I was 15 because I was on September 26th, my birthday. I started on the 25th, put in a quarter, and 36 hours later, I had 40 million.
Now right. What did you get for your birthday that day?
Well, I've read this story before, and the craziest part of it as an arcade owner is, what did you tell the arcade guy who owned the place that was just like, you were like, I'm going to play for like 36 hours.
Yes.
Did he keep it staffed? What did he do?
So I just said to him, I said, can you keep the place open for me? And he said, yeah. And he goes, if you're going to do a world record. And it actually was one of their busiest days ever because the entire arcade on both Saturday and Sunday was so filled because everybody's watching me. But what do you do when I was kind of in a corner, but every other game was being played.
Right.
Even overnight?
Well, overnight, what it was my dad stayed with me.
Mm-hmm. Did he sleep there or did he stay awake?
He stayed awake. I mean, wow. I had my folks, so I had a lot of support. There were about 5-6 people that stayed overnight.
Wow.
Because it was kind of it wasn't an easy thing to stay up,
No, it's not.
Overnight.
You need like interaction. You need people talking to you.
And and the thing is that the thing you had to be careful about, and there's players today are a little bit more savvy on this. You can't get more than 255 free men.
Oh,
if you got 256,
I was going to ask about that. Yeah.
So if you got 256, it would go to 0. so there was a moment when you're like, you know what? I think I got too many guys. I'm going to go pee or whatever for 5 minutes. Mm-hmm. And you knew you'd lose 15, 20 guys. But you
we
always
tried to track Lauren Featherstone's progress through Tapper when she broke that world record, and I honestly we were off. We found that our numbers were off by probably 20 lives
because the screen will only display like 5, right?
Well, every time it goes off, you need to listen for the chime, and we're all there for 24, 36 hours straight,
tired,
so we're all exhausted. We're doing it in waves now. Meanwhile, you or Lauren has to like continue to power through. And it certainly all blends in your head after a while.
Well, and that's what's really funny because, like, I can't relate to early 80s, but I can relate to, like, when Lauren Featherstone broke the world record for Tapper and we stayed up all night playing random music.
Which is like the same thing.
Yeah,
right?
It really was.
Same story.
I mean, it's the same game, too. I mean,
well, if you look on Google, there's some, if you look at images of Ben Gold Arcade, there's actually a really good one of me at the Stargate that's almost iconic. Of the 1980s gaming thing, so it's
and it was just an arcade that was just packed Saturday and Sunday, right?
there. Oh,
this one right here, right?
Yeah, that's it. That was Pro Video, which was
that's cool.
So that was kind of, if you can imagine, there was like 100 people that were behind us, not 100, maybe 50, but it was like a really, really big crowd, especially that's right when I was about to break the record.
I never worked at Pro Video. I lived there for 7 years. Like I never actually went in there. It's before my time, but I lived at Preston Beltline for 7 years.
Wow.
And I've walked to that for so many times. I can't even imagine where Pro Video was, only that like, here's where it is. Here's where it was.
Yeah, I just want to rip off their tagline, where the pros play. I'm like, that was good. That was smart. That was awesome. But yeah, here you go.
Yeah, so
that's so cool.
Yeah, that was a really good experience.
Did they sell videos? Pro Video games. That was what it is.
Yeah,
okay.
It was just an arcade.
VHS.
It was kind of like the second generation arcade. After the 70s, early 80s, a bunch of people came and they were like, we're going to take this seriously.
Yeah.
And that was Pro Video.
So we had a really good, so that kind of got me on the radar, because then for 2 weeks I was famous. I had the world record, and all he had to do back then is Walter called up the arcade owner. Arcade owner said who he was, talked to he talked to me, talked to my dad maybe,
right,
and boom, I had the world record. No need for recording scores, no question there. And what's funny was back in the day,
the ability to do it would be it was very, very hard. It's hard now.
To what?
To record that stuff. Like it's still a
well, especially
challenge.
with a game that takes like 36 hours.
Oh my God.
Like back then I can't even imagine, because nowadays you have to record it the whole time, stream it the whole time. So back then it's a lot of tape.
Well, the thing is that the concept, like I just was like, okay, I got the world record. Now let's go do something else, or let's go and keep playing games. And the idea that other people lied, it was, both Walter and I couldn't imagine it. Like, why would you lie about a score? What would be, just so that you can be famous for a while, you'd be known as a crook.
Right.
And anyway, so that was just really.
Well, and if I remember correctly, Walter Day asks the arcade operator at Pro Video, right? He's like, get off the phone. Let me talk to the owner. And he's like, did he set it? And he said, yes. And that was it. He's like, you're good. You did it. Way to go. And so you can see a lot of potential avenues though for people who wanted to cheat.
Oh, and there were plenty. But the funny thing is that that event led to Walter inviting me to go to Ottumwa to go do the Life magazine photo shoot. My parents were very excited about it. They kind of looked at it and said, we're not sure what he's doing, but it's not drugs. And, it's something that he's passionate about, and we'll support him to pursue this to the end.
Well, it's kind of weird because I'm going to say this a lot during this podcast, because the way I relate to this is when I was 14 and 15 and 16, I was traveling with my team that featured like 21-year-olds, 28-year-olds, 35-year-olds to go play a first-person shooter called Counter-Strike. And like, I read your story and I was like, as a dad, I'm like, this is so weird. Like, what's going on? But like, as a gamer, I was like, this is exactly how it happens.
Yeah.
It's just a bunch of people who like become close based on a game, and that's it. Like, that's all it takes for them to want to try to make it big. So it was really cool.
Well, and what's funny was, and I'll jump, but I discovered Counter-Strike. I was living in Romania, and I opened up.
Counter-Strike's big in Romania.
Well, I opened up this internet arcade with my wife. From the time she was my girlfriend, and we thought that was the way to go. That would be a great business to be in. And it was funny because I rediscovered video games for the first time, because it was like literally 15 years, like since 85 to 2000. I didn't play anything, maybe Tetris, and I remember, opening up this arcade and then creating a LAN, because we would get like these 10-year-old kids that would, a group of them, and they all wanted to play with me. And it wasn't because of my expertise. It was because I would take 2 steps and I was dead. And I'm like, what the hell's going on here?
Right.
But then I learned. I actually enjoyed that as a game.
This is a total aside. I'm sorry, YouTube. Did you ever run any qualifiers for like the CPL in Romania? Like, I remember a Romanian LAN center, so I'm just making sure it's not the same one.
No,
Okay.
There's not.
There were lots in Romania, because that was kind of how people were playing Counter-Strike and stuff.
It was it was a huge interest in it. I mean, there were a lot of people that would be in our arcade playing the or internet cafe playing Counter-Strike.
All right, so you set the world record, Stargate. You get invited to Time Life Shoot by Walter Day.
Yes.
So you go up there.
Yep.
And what was that like? What was the trip like? Your parents supported it.
Did they drive you? Did they?
No. Well, what I did was I took Dallas to Chicago and then Chicago to Ottumwa.
Nice.
And I remember, man, it was so hard. I almost got lost in Chicago because I had to go change terminals to this really dinky because it was a direct flight, like one of these
puddle jumper
airplanes that got there. And I just remember. I remember the first time I went, and I finally felt like I had found my soulmates. Yeah. I don't know how to put it, because it's like all of a sudden, in Dallas, I could be the best at every game at my local arcades, or best in the sense that maybe there was someone that challenged me on Tempest, and there was someone that challenged me on Stargate, and there was someone that challenged me on Pac-Man. But then all of a sudden I would come there, and it's like, I didn't have it, for Donkey Kong, Pac-Man, stuff like that. Obviously Billy and Steve Sanders were really big into that. And it's like, okay, they were so far better than where I was at, because to be honest, that wasn't really my total passion. But the idea being is that then I said, okay, but I was the best, or still of the best, on some games like Millipede and some of these shoot 'em up. So I kind of learned to specialize and use that to my advantage to say, okay, here are the games that I, compared to other players, could do very well. Mm-hmm. And that helped me when I determined how to compete, how to play. It was a good skill to have.
I just can't believe the level that you guys achieved back then. And even when I read reports about, like, say that's incredible competition where you have 21 players and like you emerge from it. If I just take a random sampling of 21 players, even if I take a random sampling of 21 players I would suspect are good at the game, I'm not going to end up with Ben Gold. Like, I just can't imagine, like, the things that you accomplish in video games, the high scores you've achieved are really amazing. Like, they really do stand a test of time. Maybe they're not, like, maybe they've been surpassed by someone who is willing to go 48 hours or whatever, but you voluntarily quit. They voluntarily quit. Like, you reached the highest level possible in this game, in several games. Man, to get it off of such a small sample size, no internet to find these connections. I don't know how. I guess everybody's having the same story where they're calling up Williams, trying to find the high scores and getting directed, luckily, to Walter Day.
That's, he was the closest thing that really, I look at it like this. Like, if we had the internet, 40 years ago, let's just pretend that, leave everything the same, and the only thing you change is the fact that there was this, let's say, discussion boards and people could find each other.
Yeah.
Maybe there would have been 500 people showing up for that, pre-comp instead of 21 at the arcade.
Right.
It is possible that there were people that were better than us. Mm-hmm. They just didn't know where to go.
I don't think there's a level higher of gameplay, though, than you guys were achieving right then. Like another game, maybe. But, like, you guys had maxed it out, and you're going until the point where you have to, like, consider, well, I have more than 256 lives, so I best not die.
And we're in a really kind of privileged positions, because we've seen, like, hundreds of thousands of people play these games over the last 5 years.
That's true, too. And they're not reaching those scores.
They're not even close. Like, I mean, no one's taking it as seriously, but that's what's really cool about it. Like, it seems like Walter Day did a really good job getting the best for this tournament.
Well, the thing was that Walter, you know, he has a really funny story where he went to the way he became the International Scoreboard was it took him about 15 minutes. No, let's say an hour. He made like 6 phone calls. He called up Williams. He called up Atari. He called up all the manufacturers that, hey, I want to, if anyone comes in and calls for world records, come to me. And they said to him, why are you doing this? They said, are you planning to make money off this? And Walter's like, how can I make money off of this? You know, and so he's like, no, I just want to keep a world record scoreboard. And that's all he had to do was make like 6 phone calls to the major manufacturers. And within a day, he established himself as the video game scorecard.
Well, and if I remember the story, he had all of these scores before he opened his arcade, because I think the story is he was like, I've got all these scores. I guess we should open up an arcade. But like, I don't think it was a super profitable arcade because he was constantly running like tournaments where he'd have to have like 5 Super Pac-Man and stuff. So it was like he was having to spend all this money acquiring the games and then having to sell them off before he could, like, I don't think it was that popular as an arcade, just as a like tournament destination. I don't know. I always tell everyone, Walter is the best entrepreneur, one of the best entrepreneurs I've ever met, one of the worst businessmen. And so he was like, had he had a different mentality or construction, and probably would have been better. He could have been a multi-millionaire. He had thought of the Hall of Fame. He had thought of all these different ideas in the 80s about gaming. The problem is that he was also a really nice guy. And so it was just, he never really thought, like, how do I monetize what I'm doing? And so exactly, like, and he was taken advantage of. I mean, for example, even almost everything he organized that everybody else kind of found an angle. He used the example of That's Incredible, where originally, so the story of That's Incredible is that we came back, we went in November for Life magazine. Then in, I guess it was December, like over the New Year's break, we had a competition. That's where 21 people showed up. Right.
And it was the preliminaries, and the top 3 got to go to California for the That's Incredible finals. And that was like a brutal 3-day event. I mean, it was 2 days of solid competition. And yet in That's Incredible, Walter Day's Arcade is a clearinghouse for high scores.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, they literally gave him 1 minute, maybe a minute and a half, and then they made everything about theirs. So it was like, that was a little frustrating because, you know, he was trying to establish himself. And
obviously that tournament he ran was brutal because you had to get so many copies of the 5 games y'all played, Frog or Donkey Kong Jr.
Yep.
Like, he had to source so many games. Like, as an arcade operator today, it's a little different, but still, I'm just like, oh my gosh, making sure you get all those games in, all working. I mean, that must have been just so crazy.
Do you recall the weekend, the preliminary round?
Oh, God, yeah, I remember.
Okay, so it's 3 days, but there's only 21 people, is that right?
Yeah, so what they did was...
What was the format?
The format was this.
Because it could not have been what we saw on That's Incredible, because that was a quick one.
Yeah. So it was
there's like a mini version on That's Incredible, I think.
So the format for Walter's competition was actually was brilliant. Okay, so the way it worked is there were 5 games. Mm-hmm. So as you mentioned, logistically, imagine having in the morning you'd have, let's say, Super Pac-Man. They'd have to wire them all up. Everybody played their games. Then when that was done, they had to take those games off and then put another 8 games of Frogger.
Because this was in Twin Galaxies' 1,800 square foot space, right?
Yes.
Oh my God.
So I never really, but I didn't. Yeah. So it was kind of like the day 1, they had 3 of the games, and day 2, or no, I can't remember if it was 2 and 3 or 3 and 2, but this is what I remember. The way it worked was, if let's say that the high score was 1,000,000 points on a game. Let's say everybody played, and whoever got the highest score, that they would have 100%. Then let's say I got 100,000, I got 10%. So the person who got the highest score was incentivized to make it as high as possible.
Yes.
Because then it made everybody else's scores less.
Yeah.
None of these games were marathon games.
Right.
And yeah, that's what it was that we played 2 games on day 1, which were my 2 worst games, and I was in 12th place. But I knew it because I think it was Donkey Kong Jr., which I hated. And I forget, I think Super Pac-Man.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
Okay, and I hated
Super
that
Pac-Man
too.
barely
It was
counts
Super
as a
Pac
Pac-Man
and
game.
Donkey Kong Jr., which
Beltran.
we watched this earlier and we were like, yikes, that's tough. That's like a rough tournament to start on.
Yeah, so I was in 12th place, and I already had figured out. So I was like, I remember this very clearly. That I was really, really close to Darren Olson. His name is now Chris Steele, but at the time is Darren. And we all knew that Todd Walker was going to kick everyone's butt. Okay, I mean Todd was the best player. Okay, like literally, he was, I think, able to get 100% on 2 of the games, and just he was like so far ahead. But on the on number 2, I kind of was looking at this, and I already knew that I was going to come, I think, 4th place. I already figured it out. And I'd figured out that Darren was going to come 2nd, and that Eric Ginner, if you remember the winner from Centipede, he was going to come in 4th. Okay, or 3rd, and I was going to come 4th. I already knew that because I already ran the numbers in my head of where everybody was going to be. Now, the funny thing is that nobody else saw me as a competitor, which was one of my biggest advantages. I always learned in competitions, keep your mouth shut. That's the most important thing. Don't let anybody know who you are. Okay, if you can, keep it. Eventually, they are, but generally, it's better in a competition for them to realize who you are late than early. Okay, just makes your chances better. So I kept really quiet. Millipede was, I think, the 2nd to last game.
I think it was the 3rd game, but yeah.
It might have been the 3rd one. That might be right. So Millipede was the 3rd one on day 2. I got 100% on it. And that suddenly put me like in 5th or 6th place. Everyone's like, go, Ben, go, because they thought it would make everybody else lower. But they forgot that it also gave me 100%. So then it was Frogger and I forget.
That's what I'm trying to. Joust was the 4th game, and then Frogger was the 5th game. Yeah.
Okay. And, Joust and Frogger, Joust I liked. It was a good game, and I was reasonably good at that. And Frogger, I played actually very well on all the games. I played almost to my best ability. And Eric messed up. There wasn't really a whole lot to say about it. He just didn't play his best. And I was really surprised. I'm like, why are you like the person who is the champion at Centipede, who won the national competition, and who actually I became very good friends with. I visited him and Todd in Milpitas, California, which is near where Atari is. I hung out with the guys. I really liked them both, but he just
was it 1 quarter, 1 chance?
I think I can't remember if we were given like 3 shots or something.
Okay.
Like if they gave us 2 or 3 shots, and the best score we got was what we got.
I do see people like can over or underperform under those type of scenarios where you have a limited amount of opportunities to play.
Well, I mean, random stuff. You get kind of into the game, and then you start
into
dying, and it messes with your head.
You get into your own head.
You get like kind of like a
also the other thing was, maybe this is my advantage. I wasn't a party animal. There were some of the, this is like there were people there. I mean, there were like groupies, and it was a big thing. And and I mean,
we have our monthly tournaments on Sundays, which is the day after Saturday night, and that may or may not influence who wins the championship.
To be fair, that's
Sunday.
why I had to retire from games. I wasn't good anymore. I don't know. Saturday night, I couldn't compete the next day.
You're not alone.
So I was like just a nerd. Maybe it was a good thing, maybe it was a bad thing, but I kept my head there, and so I remember actually the morning, and I don't know if I don't know if Darren remembers the way I do, or Chris, is that I remember looking at him, and I think we both knew that it was him or me. We were kind of, we knew that it was going to be between us, and we kind of had a breakfast together, and so I knew that. And what was really weird was that, what I remember the most about that evening, the second night when I came in 3rd place, was this feeling, and you see it in That's Incredible, where they show me, Darren, and Todd with the trophies. Mm-hmm. And it's the first time I had so many flashes coming at me. I almost went blind. I mean, I cannot explain to you the number. It was just the sheer amount of light going bing, 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 bing. You know, I kind of felt famous for a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And then like the next morning, it was like I'm at the arcade and Walter's like, hey, USA Today's on the phone. You want to talk to him? I'm like, sure. And then all of a sudden this reporter comes up to me. Hi, I'm from the Ottumwa Courier. Can you sit down? And then, hey, Ben, the New York Times. And I'm like, I don't know what the hell to do. You know what I mean? It was kind of like, wow, okay. All of a sudden I'm famous. And that was interesting, you know?
Well, my favorite part of it is it's clear to me, and I don't know if you like felt it at the time, but though you might not have known you were going to win, you felt like it was a possibility. And like you can tell you as a person sitting there with all the flashes at you, and you're just like, yeah, this is one of the things that was going to happen. And here I am, I'm ready to take it on. And I feel like that's incredible. Everything that followed was just kind of you just being like, yep, this is what I am. This is who I am. And I always think that was like a really, really good moment for arcade gaming, because, you know, there are lots of people who could have won who might not have done as good of a job. Like, though I know, what's really fun is watching it. You're clearly a nervous teenager during all the videos, which I can't even imagine what I would have been like at the time. But you're nailing it, like low key nailing it. And I think that's really cool because it's almost like, you know, that's where you're supposed to be. But you're surprised you're there. Like, it's really cool.
Well, it was a great, you know, I look at like the end of 82 through the early part of the summer of 83. That was like 7-8 months. I loved it, man. It was like, I would go to, you know, so in Dallas, I wasn't that quote unquote famous, except for when I appeared on the front page of the Dallas Morning News or Dallas Times Herald at the time. Nice. Then I was given a, then when I was on That's Incredible, I remember that was also another funny story. So on the evening of it, right, I watched it. I actually had a friend over, or a couple friends over, and we hung out for a little bit. And then I remember I had my phone unplugged. And I put, you know, back then you put the phone in the cord, and all of a sudden it went ring, ring. And I picked it up. And it was like a prank caller, like somebody like, you know, are you Ben? And I'm like, yeah. Oh, you know, and then it was like really like for the next 3 hours. I mean, I called Walter, I called, you know, I talked to Billy, talked to all the different people. And it was just, you know, the phone was just ringing, which was also really a weird experience. Then, and then when I would go to Ottumwa, I went to Ottumwa like 4 or 5 other times. I was like a star there, you know, like I'm a normal kid in school and hung out with friends and you know, I never really let it go to my head. But then, you know, I come to Ottumwa, world champion, Ben Gold, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, okay, that was an interesting.
Definitely fun, right?
How do you not let it go to your head? Like, how did you manage to stay Ben?
You know,
was it your parents? I mean, do you want to?
Partially. I mean, I had to keep good grades, and I'm just like, you know, I have this thing. Okay, so this is my philosophy today. Okay, and it's for the last 20 years. Be nice to the people on your way up. They're the same people you'll see on the way down. Okay, and I just find that. I mean, I was just telling this to my wife. We were talking about this that in my professional career, I was at a company. Let's say company or two ago where the CEO was a drunk jerk.
Nice.
Okay. And he made millions and millions of dollars, but he was just a jerk. Okay. And now I'm with I work in technology space and been for about the last year and a half with an organization, a technology company where the CEO is a great guy. Okay. And here's the point. You can choose, you can still be successful. You don't have to be an asshole. You can still treat people nicely because simply letting things get to your head, to me, is just a really stupid way to live your life because you're going to piss people off. And then if you've got a lot of money, they're going to be friends with you because they want your money. Okay, but if you're nice to people, then you have people that want to be around you whether or not you have money or you don't, or whatever it is. They like you for who you are. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it's beautiful because like in my head, I like live in a totally different world because in my head, the reason I keep being good at stuff is I'm worried about other people being good at stuff. Like what you're saying right now is so much better than how I live my life right now.
But you see, the thing is it's okay to be competitive.
Right.
Okay, you can still be competitive because I have to be competitive in the job and what I do, because if I don't perform, there's someone else out there that's going to perform and wants to get paid the same amount of money I do. So right. You've got to perform. You've got to keep your ego in check. You just don't have to be an asshole. You can still beat somebody in a competition. You can still do everything you need to do. But when the competition's over, you don't go,
oh, it's even better, right? It's even better to be friendly when you win.
Depends on if you beat Beltran or not. If you beat Beltran,
Michael Beltran, I will never be friendly to you after I beat you. But so let's talk about going to That's Incredible.
Okay.
What was the green room like? Like, did they have sodas, snacks? Like, because I imagine you're going there and this is the biggest thing that's ever happened. How nervous were you before that?
Well, we got there because if I remember correctly, my folks came with me, by the way. I think they had to come because it was like I was a minor. I was 16. I actually had to have like a couple of hours of class of school because there's a law in Hollywood.
Like, under the whatever the act is, you have to. Yeah.
You have to, that you can't just be an actor. You've got to actually be educated. So I'm in my school. I went to Green Hill School, and the teachers there were very supportive. Like I was going to miss 3 or 4 days because it wasn't just we flew there. It was like we had to spend. What they did was they told us, here's the deal. You're going to have Burger Time, Millipede, Donkey Kong Jr., and 2 mystery games. And then they told us the mystery games.
Boy, you could have guessed
those were some mystery games.
Many times before you got to Buck Rogers. Holy cow.
Well, that was a new game, so nobody had played it.
Right. Even if it was an old game, it wouldn't be on my top 1,000 list of this might be in the tournament.
Now, if you're watching this, we do have a Buck Rogers in the collection, so we'll get it out soon.
Well, I'll bet you don't have a Cosmos.
No, we do not have a Cosmos. For some reasons.
I mean, Cosmos was such a stupid game.
It's terrible. I mean, sprites coming into you, you just shoot them. That's the whole game. That's literally the whole game.
I know, and the guy, I don't know what it was, the producer, somebody saw it and they liked it, so that was the game. And I'm like, what? We saw it, and I just looked at it. I was like, this is like one of the stupidest games I've seen. So
man, you and me have some similar stories.
But it was okay. So the thing was that Todd was by far the best at Burger Time and Donkey Kong Jr. I sucked at those games, and I knew I would get them at Millipede. Right. But Darren was very good at Millipede at the time.
Well, and the problem is they're not asking to marathon. Or time runs. It's just up to a certain score. So
correct. And what was funny was that both Darren and I, we lobbied because the scores that they wanted for Burger Time, they wanted like 20,000, and we lowered it to 8,000.
You fought for 8,000. Yeah.
Yes, because I knew I'm like, no, put it 20,000. I'm dead. So it was really funny the way we negotiated what scores we would have on each of the games.
And y'all all did that on the first level of Burger Time, right? The 8,000.
Yeah, I think so. Oh God, yeah. But I hated the game.
Right.
I still, I'm like, I got lucky.
Maybe you'd like it more if you played only on the kill screen.
God, no. But it was funny because. I had to play it. I did prep for it. I did okay with it, but I kind of did for Donkey Kong Jr. and Burger Time. I did what I had to do to win the competition. I did the best I could on those games, knowing that I could probably Buck Rogers, Cosmos, and Millipede because those are all shoot 'em ups.
Right.
I'd do fine on those. So that was kind of the way that I would. Would do it. So
at least the race format had a course so that you had a clear objective. Everybody was on an even playing field. Every time I do a multi-game tournament, inevitably one game is way overbalanced. For example, you were talking about how the 100%, you get 100% on Millipede, and maybe you play for 10 hours and no one can get past whatever X level. So they're all at 2%. Meanwhile, a game like Frogger, I don't know what the percentage breakdowns were for Frogger, but I find it way harder to score points on that game than other games. I would imagine if someone runs away with that one, it's probably not percentage-wise as high.
Well, that's the thing is that Millipede, okay, I got like 600,000. Mm-hmm. And, actually that was my first time to get in Guinness because they took that score over the what Twin Galaxies had, because that was done in a competition, and they accepted all the scores that were done for That's Incredible as being official.
If it's not, then I don't know what else to choose, what to point to.
But
otherwise, you just have to throw out every single thing that's ever done in that
of course, and that's video. Some people want to just erase history, but that's a whole nother conversation. But the idea is that we never had that for this particular competition. That wasn't an issue. So.
Because I like that format though, because you at least require the same thing, even if they are unbalanced. And like for example, they do set burger time at 20,000. At least everybody has to clear that hurdle before they move on.
Well, that was so. Remember, the first one was the 100%. The second one was just you get the score and then you go and you run to the next place.
Right. So I actually like that format. I find that format interesting.
It is if you've got it down to a limited number of. You have to have a number of games per person.
That's true.
And but I do think that you could do some combination of a 10-minute time limit and the 100%, and you could come up with some really good competitions for the marathon games. There's different ways to do that, but.
We're gonna have to work on this later, Ben, for our joint competition.
Well, I've been host one because all I want to do is figure out how to do a good Golden Age competition. Because I was watching That's Incredible, and I was like, they did it. I can't believe it. I'm excited. It was good TV, and we've produced a ton of Golden Age stuff. And ultimately, all we find out is either it's too broad and like too many people enter, and it's too short and no one cares about it, or it's too narrow and too few people enter it. Like the more kind of specialized we get, the fewer people that enter. And we've always been wanting to do that. But then I watched that That's Incredible. I was like, this is great. I love the TV. I mean, you running across the finish line. I loved that. Like, I want to put a finish line on some of our contests, and that might just be me as like a showman. I don't know, but it was awesome. I really loved watching it.
Well, the thing that you need to come up with is, in my opinion, and that's the hard part is like, let me say this. I don't know what people are really into, but you need to have, if you picked 4 or 5 games that are still very popular where people play competitively against each other, then there's different ways to structure it to make it an interesting competition. One is prize money. That would definitely be motivational. So You'd
be surprised.
We've tried that.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, we had a 5,000 prize pool, 2,500 first prize.
Really?
I have a GIF of one of the players who.
And it was cool.
It was also fun. In your town. You would have won easily.
Yeah, it was cool. It was fun, but it didn't attract the players because they were all worried about being not good enough at a certain game, and it just killed it. So we announced like 12 games that they were going to play in the qualifying, and then we're going to have like playoffs on different games. And basically, if one game wasn't that person's game, they were like, no, I don't want to play.
Right.
Which was rough.
Well, that's why I think, I'm just trying to think here that I would probably narrow it to 4 or 5 games.
Yeah, probably.
And the ones that are good, see, that's the other thing is that, like, I went in 1985. That was the last time I ever went to a competition, was in California. I think a guy named Phil Britt won it, and it was like a That's Incredible style thing.
Yeah.
And the games were they were so crappy. And I didn't really practice for it. And
I was right at the crash too.
That was during the crash. That was when they quit coming up with new ideas. I mean, but it was like, I couldn't even get excited about. I was just my folks said go there just for the heck of it,
just for fun,
for fun. But oh my god, it was just weird.
Chris, I know how to make our tournament successful. 3 copies of Cosmos.
Cosmos, there we go. Yeah,
that's the last good tournament I've seen.
There it is. That's the one lesson we take.
All right, so you win gold on That's Incredible. And I've now watched, what's really interesting to me, a ton of footage following that gold medal around. Do you have it now, or did it ever come back?
You know what's funny is I've given it, I lent it, and I'm gonna actually need to talk to my buddy Richie Knuckles.
Yeah.
So
I was watching that documentary last night, as I knew we were talking to you today.
So what was funny is that I actually started in 2012 a video game auction house. I wanted to auction high-end video game memorabilia.
I read about that. Yeah,
and what I ended up realizing, well, 2 things. Well, so Richie said to me, Ben, don't you ever sell off That's Incredible, because I thought that would be a good, that would be
it would go for a lot of money.
For a lot of money, but I'm kind of glad I did. And he said, I want to create a museum, and why don't you give it to me or lend it to me? And so it was funny because that was like my last time to really do something in video games was 2012, 2013. Number one, it was too early. Like I had the idea of, instead of us going for the eBay of the computer part that people are looking at because they pay $20 and they want to get it for $18,
right.
The nameplate for a company. I said, I wanted to get high end things that are unique, a prototype, a manuscript of how, let's say, Tempest or something was going to be built.
Right.
Something that was truly memorabilia, like a Babe Ruth signed jacket, or what I'm saying?
Back to your baseball card days. Yeah.
What I ended up finding out was that number one, the video game world, the classic gaming world, they're just pricks. Okay, I mean that's just all to say.
Oh man, I'm so glad you said it because that's awesome.
Yeah,
that's true. That's 100% true.
So I had a lot.
No comment. Not denying it.
I had a number of people. One person actually hired some hackers to break into my account.
What?
Oh yeah, one of them did, and I was like, because I had used, I didn't know a lot about websites. I had an Indian company create the website. I didn't really know at the time to make it, responsive for cell phones. And, it would have taken me, what I realized was I could have done it. Probably would have been divorced. And it would have taken going to every convention for several years to become the video game auction house guy. And I probably could, and it would have been eventually profitable because
like today it would probably be peaking, right?
And like you said, it would be a way different lifestyle.
Yeah, you'd be like finally like coming over that crest,
right?
And everyone would be like, yes, I want all this memorabilia, because the last 3 or 4 or 5 years have been insane for classic arcade games.
And the thing was that I learned, for example, the pinball. Okay, I did not know this. So pinball does not have the concept of classic. Okay, no, I'm not kidding. So I went and I've had this contact that had an old warehouse. I opened up these backsplashes that were unopened 1980, pinball games, and yet there was this other company that reproduced the same backsplash.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
And the point was a collector didn't give a shit. There was no, like, this is an original, like, it's one thing to have a Babe Ruth from 1933. It's another thing to have a reproduction of it. And, and in the pinball world, that didn't matter. There was no monetary appreciation for something that was truly from that. It was like, pinball games are to be played, and we don't really care. So
I guess I come at most of this stuff from as a bad businessman and a player, and I would think about like playing the games. And when I think particularly about playing games, classic arcade games, there's no replicating it. Period. You can't. Like you put it on an LCD, it's a different experience.
Right.
You put
real
different controls
from real
it's different.
Chips. Yeah,
everything is different. When you start monkeying things, the only way you'll see me playing an arcade 1-up is if he pays me to do it, and that's about it.
We threw that
an
away.
arcade 1-up.
You don't want to know. You don't want to know.
Geez.
But pinball degrades as you play it. So if it's a playing experience, and like even game to game, like it starts to degrade on you. Like the flippers are functioning differently. Man, Lonnie McDonald, when we streamed him doing Joust, he would talk about like counting on the buttons, fatiguing after 30 hours. But beyond that, there's no like definitive way of playing that pinball. Even if you have the real thing, it's still going to like degrade. So I'm guessing that's where the pinball mentality comes from, where it's just like they can't have that uniform experience that we need to have as a millipede player, because
you can't really have it. See,
you can't. It's not the same.
So here's the other thing is that what I discovered was that you can't really determine what makes a video game original and what makes it because the moment that first thing is you have to go in the back of it and replace the power cord, because the old power cords were never designed to play. Terrible. So you have to go in.
They weren't grounded.
That's true.
Then you got to go in and change this element. At what point have you created a cyborg? You've got this, at what moment is that no longer?
That's like a classic car question too.
Well, I can tell you our position is original code through original chips. It doesn't matter about power. It has to be like the proper monitor. So if it's a CRT, it has to have a CRT that runs that native resolution on the CRT. So that's kind of what we do. Almost all of our games run different power cords, different power supplies. But after the power supply, once it hits those chips, it's the real chips, real code. That's our kind of line. None of our competitors care about that, but we really care about it. And in pinball, it doesn't. Like nothing seems to matter. Like pinball, all they care about is that it works when they get to the table, regardless of what
really, if you flip the flipper, they want it to make the shot, whether they aimed it correctly or not.
What kind of weird Frankenstein you've made, they don't care.
Yeah. Well, what about I mean, I guess this is really an interesting question because, I mean, I think you've set up a criteria. There's some people who feel like it's the coolest thing in the world to take an authentic centipede and then turn it into a multi. Or whatever. And I look at this and
we're all triggered now.
Yeah. It's like taking a 1952 Mickey Mantle and flipping it.
Yeah.
The worst part about that conversion.
I took a 1952 Mickey Mantle. I found a sticker that I got printed of Ben Gold winning That's Incredible, and I put it on top. And see, it's like you were in a 1952 card. Isn't this amazing?
No, the worst part about that conversion is they drill the control panel, they put some extra buttons, and then they hack the harness so they can fit the little emulator board. So we've bought those before and had to do so much work. Bondo, sand it down, new control panel overlay. It's so hard. But yeah, no, we're way against that. But no one's actually made like a centipede replacement board yet, because as technology has increased and as people have become more and more hardcore and as the values of these games have increased, there are certain boards that run the original code through original chips, yet they're new boards. That's starting to happen, especially with the Williams games. I think Williams is truly the only games, because they were all in the same system. Yeah. That they've become so close with those J-Rocks. But other than that, we're pretty big haters on that emulation.
Yeah, I'm also like as a baseball card collector. I mean, I remember in the early 2000s when I was also got back into the family business. My folks still do that. They became dealers. And I remember just thinking to myself that I hated the reprint cards.
Oh, yeah. No.
I'm like, look, I like the original. I mean, I had the 52. I never had a 52 Mantle, but I had a lot of very valuable, original Clemente, a lot of the 1910 tobacco cards, stuff like that. And I always said it was so beautiful to see the real one. And then when you see these reprints, I'm just like, that's a piece of cardboard with a picture on it.
Right.
It's not the real thing. It is not. Nobody opened this, 100 years ago.
And saved it forever.
Yes. Right. This was just, you guys are trying to make cash off of nostalgia. But anyway, that's.
Well, no, my dad actually owned a jewelry store / card shop, because in the early 90s, there were card shops everywhere. It was awesome. I think the best I ever got was the Nolan Ryan shared rookie card, which for a while was really valuable, and now I held on to it too long. Lost money, but all right.
I only care about my '90s Cowboys, and I still have all the rookie cards.
The triplets,
they're still in there.
I love my Deion Sanders apparel. That was really cool. All right, so
got your do-rag.
We're halfway through this. This is our first episode. If you like what you're seeing, make sure you click subscribe. This is the Free Play Arcade podcast. We've made it through. That's incredible, right?
Yep.
So
I want to talk about the bus next.
We're gonna pick back up at the bus. So until then, we'll see you next time. Otherwise, just click subscribe and we'll be back.
See ya.